Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Fearless Road podcast. I'm your host, Michael DeVue, and this week we are in studio with the amazing Jay Thompson of hikethemountainorg. Now, normally I come to you from a nature walk or something like that, but this week we've had some weather issues, so here I am in studio doing this intro. This week, Jay Thompson, hikethemountainorg. This is a very interesting organization. Jay is an incredible leader, mentor, and coach who specializes in curating a very, how do we say it, like a menu of a specific hike for you, like a literal hike. He takes his teams, your team, your organization's team, your leadership team, your culture team, your HR team. He takes them on a hike, but before doing so, curates a very specific agenda for the hike so that each plateau, each step along that way, you're thinking about one of the strategies that you want to make change in your organization, leadership strategies, cultural shifts in mindset, talking about ways to create environments that are both safe and vulnerable for your employees, encouraging safe spaces, brainstorming, whiteboarding, you name it. Like this hike can be very tailored to your specific needs. And that's what Jake specializes in. But it's also out in nature. You're also team building. You're also gaining some positive feedback and touching the earth, which is important and valuable. Jay reflects on his own personal journey, learning to pivot after a baseball, having a setback in college, where the world sort of sets him on a different path. He reflects on the importance of mentors, on diverse passions, and focusing on the end goal that can inspire comfortability with change. Jay and I discuss the power of personal responsibility in creating a workplace environment that your employees want to be in, how to let go of certain habits so that you can focus on what you're best at, and how to notice when it's time to make that change in your organization. So, listen for an enlightening conversation with Jay from Hike the Mountain, and maybe you'll discover a few ways that you can embrace change in your workplace as a leader as well. And if you're interested in getting a hold of Jay, don't forget it's Jay at hikethemountainorg. And thank you for listening to The Fearless Road. Remember, stay fearless. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fearless Road podcast. I am Michael DeVue, your host. We are here in studio today, and I'm very excited to have Jay Thompson from hikethemountainorg, a gentleman that I met recently through the Speaker Lab, which has actually been a bevy of incredible talent and people and resources. For me, I'm very blessed to have this, but his story and his passion and his message really resonated with me, and I figured it would also resonate with our audience and our listeners. Jay was a former teen entrepreneur with a landscape business, a very ambitious young man turned full-time coach and motivational speaker. Now, whether that's hiking the peaks of company culture or personal development, finding a hiking partner on your journey to success can make all of the difference. And what Jay brings to this particular trail, this particular path, both the Fearless Road and our hiking together, which I think is pretty cool,
Yep.
is going to be amazing and helpful for everybody out there today. I think we're going to get some really cool tips and tricks and into some fear while we hike. I mean, what better place to discover some of the things and phobias and fears that we have than on a path climbing the heights, So let's begin. Let's hit the trail and let's let the journey begin with Jay Thompson from hikethemountainorg. Welcome,
Awesome.
Jay.
Thanks, Michael. I so appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. I, like you, have met some incredible people through the Speaker Lab, you being one of those top people as well. And very seldom in life does it seem like you can find a place with a lot of like-minded people that can encourage and challenge and spur one another on in a way that I found at the Speaker Lab. And I think it's because of the passion of people who have a message to share. There's something powerful about that. And regardless of what that message is, I mean, as you well know, we've met people within that group that have messages for businesses, for people, for families, for people in crisis, for people who experience success, and everything in between. And so it's been quite a journey over the past couple of years as I've been with that group, and so I'm excited about that, and just looking forward to today, sharing a few things and hearing. Always enjoy our conversations together. I always have my little notepad here, and I write down things, my little Michaelisms that I get from these things. So I
Mike, a
appreciate
little nuggets. We're
it.
gonna get it. We're gonna find some nuggets today. That's this journey of hiking our own particular mountain, our own fearless road, and of course digging and mining for gold, which is what all these episodes are about. We're mining for really great nuggets of truth and honesty and authenticity, things we can put into practice in our lives. And I think you're right. It hadn't even occurred to me that, our group at the Speaker Lab, and we'll just give a shout out to them right now, which is thespeakerlab.com. If you are familiar with them, helping people build and create their journey with motivational speaking and turn into a speaking business, a professional, profitable speaking business. But what's really amazing about that are the people, 100%. There's so many incredible people with so many incredible messages and experiences. Like you said, in one location, right, that we just have access to. It didn't even occur to me that, it's our own little therapy group.
That's a good description of it.
Yeah, we're trying to get our messages out there, but we're also there to listen to each other, right, and hear these journeys. And so many people have so many incredible journeys that I think, we are not alone. I think if you do feel like you are, if you feel like it's difficult on this path as an entrepreneur, building your own dream, building your own business, it can feel slightly isolating and an island unto yourself. But I am here to tell you that there are a ton of people out there on this journey, sharing their successes, sharing their stories, sharing their failures, sharing their dreams. And this is one of those places, this is one of those places where we're going to share that stuff and that experience with our audience and our listeners, hopefully getting some feedback both from you as well as other experienced professionals out there who are on this journey. And Jay, so hiking the mountain, which is a great metaphor for a lot of things in life. Wow. I mean, congratulations on getting that .org and that .com domain. Yeah, I thought the Fearless Road was pretty cool. I was super lucky to land on the name and not have anybody already take it. Yeah. So I was very happy about that. Now I have to live up to it. So I have to make sure I'm not sucking at my job. But as we hike the mountain in our own lives, right, towards our own successes and towards our own mountain tops and peaks, talk to me a little bit about what hikethemountainorg, specifically what that does, what you do there, and how that helps companies and corporations and company culture today. But also, how have you seen this metaphor shape itself? I'm assuming it was one idea that you had, but then it's grown into its own thing over time.
Yeah, those are great questions. So let me kind of step back and go. For me, this whole process of getting to with Hike the Mountain, at its core, what we do is we help bridge the gap between belief and behavior within a company's culture. As you well know, every company, every person has their own culture. I would say that is a set of values really that kind of drive them, their own integrity. And so every company has a culture. Oftentimes the poster of that culture that is posted on the wall is not matched by how people actually behave in the company that they work. And so that's what I do. I help to find ways to bridge the gap between what a company and individuals say they believe and ultimately how they behave. And so I do that in a couple different ways. I do that through something called a trail guide and a walk and talk video, which is a weekly little one sheet PDF that I produce for organizations around their values and living those out. And then I make a short little video that takes maybe one of the points that I've written about in that one pager, and I talk about that a little bit. And what I have found, Michael, people learn in a lot of different ways. Some people are very visual. Some people like to read. Some people like to have to write it down. I'm kind of a mix of that. If I'm listening to something and something hits me, I've got to write it down, and I probably am going to draw some kind of a little picture that goes along with it. But if I can watch or listen to a video, it's even more powerful. So that trail guide that I produce in the walk and talk video, I have companies that I do that for every week. One bank I've been doing that. I'm actually this morning it went out as for 474 weeks in a row. I've done that for just one bank, and I've done it for multiple others as well. But so I do that. I also help to do some personal coaching with teams and or individuals around. I call them the 6 switchbacks of personal development, and kind of take them on that journey. As you know, a switchback is, you can go up a mountain a couple of ways. One, probably the easiest, is hop in the helicopter, fly to the top, get out, enjoy the view, and then fly back down. But that's not really hiking. That's called helicoptering, I guess. But so it's quite a thing there when it comes to what we're gonna be able to do. But how you're gonna hike that mountain? You can either go straight up, right, and you can head straight up, hardest way possible, or you can take the switchbacks, which go back and forth, up and down the mountain, up and around the mountain to ultimately get you there. I do some coaching around that, about that personal development around those switchbacks as well. I also do some keynote speaking. I actually even take groups out on a hike. I just call it Take a Hike, and we'll go out for a half day or for a full day, and we'll go and do a hike, and I'll share some different things I've learned on the trail when I'm out with them that way. So there's a lot of different ways in which to help to reinforce that culture when it comes to working with organizations. So that's kind of what I do when it comes to business development or personal development, business development, and helping to impact the culture of companies. That's kind of the role that I play. The birth of Hike the Mountain, where this whole thing came from, was back when I was 40 years old, long ago, 15 years ago now. I set a goal to hike the entire Appalachian Trail before I turned 50. I've hiked a little over 1,700 miles so far on the Appalachian Trail, and haven't quite finished yet before I was 50, but I've done 1,700 miles, and I've learned a lot of things along the trail. And so that's something that's kind of where my passion and stuff for hiking has come. I go for at least 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks out of the year. Me and one of my buddies will go and we'll hit the trail. We actually leave November the 4th. We'll be going from the 4th through the 18th of November this year. We'll be in Vermont and keep heading north on the Appalachian Trail. So that's where my passion and my love and I wouldn't even call it an addiction for hiking comes from. Michael, for some reason, I'm not hearing you right now. I hate to hit a pause on that.
Sorry, how's that better?
There we go. Perfect.
There you go, folks. You know what? When you mute yourself, I don't have a producer in there, right? Studio. Yes.
We need to learn to mute ourselves sometimes, but then sometimes when we got something worth saying, we need to remember.
Oh, if my mother were alive, the things she would say right now. She couldn't mute me to save her life. In fact, I think my mom used to suffer from pharyngitis. And laryngitis every now and then, losing her voice and stuff. And I mean, I think I can honestly say that I have lived my entire life and never lost my voice. Much to the chagrin, I'm sure, of my parents and other people. Where was I? Okay, so we were talking about the trail. We're talking about like this 1,700 miles of inspirational trail that you've been on for a long time. What I was asking for, I was actually commenting about how late in the season it was to start hiking in November, which I thought would be cold or you would run into weather issues. That was sort of like an anecdotal comment that I was making. But then on top of this, like when along your journey of hiking did you begin to develop the idea that you could apply physical steps of hiking a mountain to cultural shifts and change in the mindset in the workplace?
So I think for me, that probably comes back down to two things in my background and my experience. So back when I've had three big passions of what I want to do in life, I guess, through the years. One was I wanted to be a professional baseball player. So I played baseball since I was 5 years old, played all through Little League, high school, got the pitching scholarship to Georgia State as a pitcher. I was top 10 in my region in Georgia in pitching and hitting and all of that. Signed my scholarship to pitch at Georgia State University. 2 weeks after I signed, they dropped the baseball program there. I was devastated. What I learned through baseball is, especially through pitching, is that I can have all the ability in the world, but if I'm not a student of the game, and if no matter how hard I throw, the batter has a bat and can always get a hit. But if I will study the batter, I can pitch to their weak spots and my strengths, and I can accomplish something. So that's something I learned from baseball that has translated to understanding from a culture standpoint for companies, is that every company has a weak spot. And if we can identify areas that they are strong in, then maybe they are able to then lift up those areas of weakness, and they can see success by leveraging their strengths to overcome their weaknesses. So that's one of the things. Second to that is landscaping. You'd mentioned that about me being an entrepreneur early. I mean, I have mowed my fair share of yards. I have pushed a lawnmower around a neighborhood. I've learned to do all of that stuff. When my pitching scholarship went away, I ended up going to Auburn University in landscape architecture, got my degree in landscape architecture. And what I learned through that was I learned a design process. I learned to see an end product before it ever existed, and then discovered the method to come up with all the steps necessary to create that end product, that thing that I saw, that end design. And so for me, how that has translated is from a company culture standpoint, it has helped me to help people and organizations see who they can be, and then design a process and plan to take the necessary steps to get there. So that's baseball, that's landscape. And then the third for me was ministry. I've been in ministry for 35 plus years. You and I have talked about that before.
Yes.
And that's a big part of my life. Faith is a big part of my life. And one of the things I learned about faith was I have to be in someone's life before I can ever speak into someone's life, right? Is that if I can have the most incredible truth in the world, but if I've not earned the right to be heard by somebody, it's just going to be Charlie Brown teacher to them, right? You know, wah, 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 that's what it's going to be. And
Yes.
And so from that, how does ministry? It's taught me from a culture standpoint with organizations, is that instead of me coming in being Mr. Fix-It, if I build the relationship with them, they get to know me, I get to know them, then we can help to identify those steps. And I have earned the credibility to be able to speak into the direction for the organization when it comes to culture. So all of that to say, along the way of hiking for me, what I learned was the only way to get to the top of the mountain is one step at a time. And so put all of that together, right? Baseball, understand strength and weaknesses. Landscape, see a design, and then the steps to get there. Ministry, connect first, instruct second. And then with hiking is that it is a consistent process over time will lead you to the greatest heights you'll ever see. But the only way you do that is one step at a time. So put all of that together. That's where Hike the Mountain was birthed. And I'm so glad we're recording this, because I don't know that I have formally ever said it exactly that way. It was kind of, it's an aha moment. It's a great stop on the fearless road here, for me as I kind of go through this. So, and I guess the takeaway from that is just don't discount the moment you're in, because you don't know what the moment you're in is going to teach you about the moment you're going to experience in the future. So that's just a good thing that you've let me just kind of babble on here a little bit and kind of understand my journey.
Well, there's a lot to absorb here. I don't know if audiences are going to be doing this while I'm doing this, because I'm such a visual person. I love the idea of putting into physical steps, you know, literally with your team, your teammates, your corporate culture, your company, actionable physical steps that we take on this journey together as a group, while applying and looking at ministry, and ministry, not to turn anybody off, from the God complex of it all and the Christianity complex of it all. But I think we're all here ministering to our message and to our audience and our base about ways to A, improve their lives, B, hopefully improve their businesses, and C, improve their relationships. And the relationships you talked about, it's very important, I think, in a company culture today, to realize that you are in a relationship with a number of things. One, you're in a relationship with your client, your customer, your product line, that whole journey. You're in a relationship with your employees. And a lot of companies never really bothered to look at strategy from an internal standpoint, right? We were never encouraged to do that. Businesses and companies were never really encouraged to look at an internal strategy and corporate culture as a meaningful practice of developing not just a positive environment where good product is made and good services are done, but building a strong foundation for a longer term, longer impact in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think when we think about building a business, I mean, you and I have to do this when we were talking about, and Speaker Lab talks about, what is your why? What is your purpose? What's your positioning, expert positioning statement? Just taking the time to develop these vision mapping strategies, which is what you were discussing earlier, which is how to reverse engineer a vision mapping strategy for getting you where you want to go, right? Whether that's the landscape idea of the final product, the beautiful garden and the berms and the flowers, where they're going to go, how we're going to plant them, how often are we going to water them, what watering systems are we going to need in place? Like, all of those different things are the same as looking at a final version and vision of what you want to be, what your company wants to be, and then reverse engineering that map and the steps it takes to get there. And I think anybody that isn't looking at a cultural strategy from an internal standpoint is going to miss the boat. You cannot be running a successful company these days without considering when you define success, how does that correlate to your internal company culture? How does that correlate to the services that you provide, both as a company to your employees, but services that you provide outside of that to the public? And finally, what are you going to do? How do you define success within that, right? So it's not just the profits that are coming in. It's not just the amount of items and widgets that are being sold. It's a larger idea about success and value. I was talking to another person earlier, actually for someone from the Speaker Lab, who I think is going to be on the show, which I'm very excited about, talking about gratitude. That's his specific topic is about giving back and charitable behavior practices and things like that as a company culture. And what does it mean to add that to your strategic vision mapping, right? And I was talking to him about, well, I think part of the reason why this is important and crucial is it's how we define success. I think you and I grew up with the idea that entrepreneurs and businesses define success from a bottom dollar concept, from a shareholder mentality, and not from a corporate culture standpoint. And one of the things that I was looking at recently about value, like self-worth and value, how do we begin to define what that looks like? Am I living by somebody else's idea of what value and integrity is and success means to them? Or am I living it by my own standards? And I can't be the best that I can be and give the best that I can give to the company, the organization, or the people or community if I'm not living in my authentic integrity, right? And when you're coming from that place, when you've established that part of yourself, what you end up providing and giving, not only to the organization you work with, but all the people, is ultimately some of the best stuff out there. It's some of the best you can possibly give. I think right now we're in a space where redefining what that looks like is happening in a number of ways, including Hike the Mountain, which I think asks the question, if you're going to build a set of steps to get you to a particular goal, have you begun to look at what the value systems are? Have you begun to look at your integrity? Have you begun to look at your impact and your cultural impact, both internally and externally? And how do you want to get there? Why do you want to get there? Like, what's the purpose if you haven't defined it yet, right? Why do you want to have the impact you claim that you want to have with your product, with your services, with your company culture. And I don't know that a lot of hopefully a lot of places are asking that question. Do you find yourself in a unique position to help them find their way?
Yeah, I think it was John Maxwell said, if you find your why, you find your way. Simon Sinek said you have to start with why, his whole concept of that book.
Yeah.
And, as he talks about that, your why determines your what you do, and your what ultimately determines how you do it, right? We started, most of the time, everybody typically starts on how they're going to do something, and then what that is. And then, it's the why, the how, the what, right? This is what we're going to make. We're going to make these widgets. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it through these processes. And why are we doing it? Because we want to make a ton of money. Well, at the end of the day, that I don't know that continues to get you up every Monday to keep getting after what you need to get after, right? It is a bigger why, a bigger purpose, a bigger accomplishment that way. And I think that is something that falls on the leadership of every organization is two things. One is to remind everybody in the organization that what they are doing is valuable and why it's valuable, communicating that message. And secondly, I think one of the second, if there's a 1 and a 1A for leadership is not only to remind people that what they're doing is valuable, but to help the people see that they are valuable as well. And I think that's the disconnect a lot of times is
Sure.
that one, they don't see how they fit, and two, they're not perceived or recognized as being valuable to the organization. And I think that is one of the things from a culture standpoint, how the greatest investment any company is going to make is not in a better process, not ultimately even in a better product. It's in helping to make sure you have better people, making the people that are there better.
Yes.
If people, I always say it this way, you have to be something before you can do something, right? And I think that is, from a leadership standpoint in an organization, you've got to help people understand their be before you harp on them on what they do. And if you reinforce who they are, it'll impact what they do.
Well, and this comes back to a real basic. We are human beings, not human doings.
Right.
And I think the second part of this that struck me was we're asking our leaders, our company leaders, corporate leaders, executive leaders. And by the way, y'all have a big task in front of you. 40 some odd years, and I'm only speaking about my particular history, which is 53 years on this planet. And the majority of that was during a time when leadership did not ever include embracing, building up, and supporting your employees. It wasn't about us. It was about your product or about your service. And it had nothing to do with the staff or the employees. And I think the reason why we are where we are now is we can't sustain it. In fact, the entire, resignation generation, which I think, yes, I would probably say Gen Zs, but Gen Xs are the ones who put up with this stuff for so many years where we thought making money was where it mattered. And now we're so dissatisfied with that thinking and that process with that we're asking for more. We're asking for a different type of world. And I think the younger culture that's coming up underneath us is recognizing it so quickly that they're now demanding it. And we're putting in our leaders in a position where it's tough to be a leader. And with this type of ministry, this type of messaging, this type of culture, company culture change and mindset shifting, when we are individuals ourselves who don't know how to define our own self-worth and value outside of the deliverables that we provide for a company, right? If we're always meeting the bottom line in company quarterly reports and things like that, and that's where we found our value, now we're shifting the entire mindset to The value is inherent in the individuals that we build up and support and build integrity and self-worth in our company, that then, therefore, as a result of their satisfaction going up, their happiness going up, their gratitude going up, deliver a better set of products and services for us on our behalf, right? No one's ever looked at it that way, tending to the roots of a system, not just the branches and the fruit that come off of it, right? We haven't looked at it that way, and they're asking a lot from our leaders. When you work with them at Hike the Mountain, what are some of the biggest challenges you find right now with leaders who have to take on this role themselves if they're not in a position of understanding their own self-worth and value?
I think it comes back to this whole thing that you talk about so often is the fear. And I think one of the number one greatest fears for most leader, I'm going to say C-level folks, that kind of stuff, people that I've connected with and work with, is the fear of vulnerability. They don't want people to be able to see behind the curtain. They don't want, there's the fear of what happens if everybody realizes I don't have it all together, or I don't have all the answers, or I don't have, and so that fear of vulnerability, I think, is one of the biggest obstacles. Let me keep it in my genre of hiking the mountain.
Yep.
That's one of the biggest obstacles of getting to the place that they want to be. And I think, to go back to that, you're talking about my generation, your generation. We grew up loving the cliches, saying this. We could make a living off of cliches.
If we had a dime, yeah.
Right. The challenge, and I think what it is going on right now is I think people today are like, I want the reality of I want the truth of what the cliche is. Don't feed me the line without giving me the truth. And so to say, hey, there's no I in team, that's easy to say, but that's not how we live.
Yeah.
That we recognize your effort, but we reward their results. That's what we do. And that's the disconnect, is that because again, that the whole truth of, for people, what you reward is what's repeated. So we've rewarded probably the wrong things a lot of times. And I'm not going to say I have rewarded the wrong things in my own life that have been repeated, and I'm repeating things in my life, and I'm like, why do I do that? It's because I reward myself with that, and I need to change that. And so before I'm going to point fingers there, I think, and I have seen with people I've worked with, but I see for myself, is that fear of vulnerability, that for me to let them see the man working behind the curtain is not really Oz, the great Wizard of Oz. He's just a man pulling some levers like everybody else. I think that's scary for folks.
And I think we are talking about systemic issues that our systems, especially ones you and I grew up with, had a reward-based setup for rewarding conformity, rewarding you to, deliver these things, stay in this place, dress like this, look like this. You get this perfect house, that perfect wife, this car, that job, that 401k. And the idea was that by conforming to all these things, happiness would be yours. This American dream, whatever that's supposed to mean these days, which is, to me, an American dream is what it should be called, not the American dream, because anyone can build their dream in America, and it could be different every single time, and it should be. It should be as colorful as the flag is. It should be as beautiful as the rainbow. It should be as creative as we are as a nation, as individuals, right? And not just conforming to one mindset of what success and value needs to be. That vulnerability, that fear, our leaders are going to need to step up, and they're going to need support. They're going to need a set of systems and a set of shows and podcasts and hike the mountains and whatever out there in order to help them become the people we are now asking them to be. We are now demanding from our executive leaders, our leadership in companies and corporate culture, to make these changes. And it's not without, it is our responsibility to A, hold them accountable, but B, provide them the support that they need. We can't just be like, you did it wrong and point the finger. We have to be in that arena with them, helping them figure out how to climb that particular mountain, how to develop that corporate strategy and that mindset. And if it is a challenge and if it is difficult and you work in a corporate company where that culture is a mess and that system isn't working and they're trying to make change, be a part of that change, not a ridiculer, not a criticizer. Nobody needs somebody sitting in the cheap seat pointing fingers. We have plenty of people who aren't willing to get down into the dirt and into the arena and do the hard work.
Right.
Like there's a lot of people who could sit in armchair quarterback all day long. But when we are talking about real change, meaningful, impactful corporate culture change, it's everybody at the table, all hands on deck. Do you find that that's a disconnect as well, that the employees are still waiting to be led like sheep out of the dark, by some great leader, as opposed to being the leader you want to see, be the change you want to make, kind of a scenario?
I think there's different camps, if you will. There are those that are like, I'm only going to stay in my lane. This is what I want to do. This is what I get paid to do. I'm going to stay right here. And I'm going to do what's expected, but not more.
Yes.
And there are people that are that way. I also think there are people that are willing to follow leadership but they're not right now because they either don't trust the leader, they don't even know the leader. There's a disconnect there.
Yes.
I think that's a group. And I also think there is a group, it's a small group. Last stat I saw was about 35% of people are quote unquote engaged in their work. The other 65% are disengaged. And of that 16% of those, last stat I read, are actively disengaged. That's mean they're doing things. There's a group of people out there that are doing things to take the company down and make and so again, I don't think that's where we need to be at all. That format. I think the challenge is this. You said it a minute ago. If you only point out problems, you're going to frustrate yourself and everybody else. But if you can recognize a problem, own the part of it that is yours, and provide paths for solutions for everybody involved, I think that is being real and being authentic in that situation as a leader. And I think one of the things that I have found is when leaders have come up to that sense of that vulnerability or that fear of vulnerability, of being real and being authentic, sometimes in front of everybody in the organization, what I have done is I've been able to come along beside them, listen to them, and be able to help them communicate in a realistic way, kind of their story where they're at. There's a great disconnect oftentimes, because like between a CEO or a COO and people on their team that work on the team underneath them, if you will. There's a disconnect because they don't know how to take what's important and speak that in a language that the troops understand, if you will, that are doing that. And that's one of the things that I work with as I work with them to go, let's find common language and I help them tell their story of where they want to go and who they are and that kind of stuff in a way that connects more with the average person in the organization, as opposed to doesn't sound like I do that. I'm just listening to myself talk here, going like I'm not even thinking. I don't think I'm communicating this in a clear way.
But I think you pointed. Yeah, I think you pointed it out. You hit the nail on the head here, which is developing the language. we don't have that. That language is not inherent in our current systems of corporate culture, of company organization or culture. The language to use that we're talking about, which is the language of vulnerability, the language of connecting, the language of, and this is what I was going to ask you a minute ago, do you think it's important and valuable for us as a company and organization? Is it important to admit the mistakes of the past before beginning to move forward? Meaning, if we're going to establish a new paradigm, a shift in our thinking and our company culture, and we want buy-in from the employees, we want buy-in from everybody, right? Is it important to start with a fresh slate by saying, hey, this is what we used to do, this is how we used to be. When I got clean and sober, I had to admit my wrongdoings to my family members. I had to make amends to them in order to begin to make my steps moving forward. And then I had to hold myself accountable and my own integrity by continuing to make good and positive steps. When you're a CEO, a COO, CFO, and you speak on behalf of a company, these issues, these behavior problems, these challenges may not be something you developed, may not be something that it's not you who did it, but you now have to take ownership of it in order to make the change. What does that look like when we're asking someone to take responsibility for a company and its behaviors and its choices over the last however many years we're talking here, and then to enact and begin to ask for change? What language would you recommend, or do you offer these CFOs, these executive leaders, to help them start developing a way to communicate and a way to make that, to get that message across so that we can begin to see progress and actionable steps?
That's a huge challenge of I think you have to just be open and honest and recognize the situation that you're in. I would say this: if it's something that you did as the leader, and it's your oh crap moment, right?
Yeah.
You got to say, I messed up. If you're open and honest about something, people may go, "Wow, man, Jay's a jerk," but at least he understands he's a jerk. I mean, so we can begin to find common ground that we all agree that I'm a jerk and was a jerk. Now, how do I not be a jerk moving forward? So I think you got to.
And how do I ask you to not be a jerk? Like, this is what we're doing. Is we're basically saying, please change who and how you are, but I have to do that first. Like, I have to represent that change
for
the company.
I think the bigger challenge
comes
is when it was not something that you were a part of, and and again, you have to recognize it and go, I know this is a challenge. Sure. I know there's baggage. I understand there's hurt. I understand there's broken relationships. I understand, fill in the blank of whatever that is.
Sure.
I recognize that. What I know is this: I can't fix what has happened, but together we can chart a path of what will happen in the future. So that's where, and the only way I know that you can ever demonstrate that commitment that you want to change is to change. I mean, I don't, my dad always, and my dad always said this: it takes a whole lot of that of boys to make up for one shit, right? And in life, that's true. So if there's a mess up in the past, the only way you're going to show that there's a change is you do you make the right things and do the right things moving forward. And again, there comes a point in time where you got to recognize it, but then we've got to let it go.
Yes.
And then to move forward.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a time for acknowledging, and then there's a time to, like, okay, now we're in the stasis of progress.
Right.
We're no longer reflecting on whatever, right? Pick a place in the past and reflect on it. We are now in the midst of those changes, and here are the ways and steps that those are going to be.
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure. Sure.
is I think the best way to do that is moving forward as successes happen. Don't only tell the success stories of the leaders. If you can become a success story sharer of other people within the organization. Again, it's great when I hear that my leader has accomplished something, but I feel even better when my leader shares a story of how my team in the organization accomplished something. And so I think that is that to acknowledge that from the past and to move forward is that you have to then acknowledge the incremental successes along the way of everybody in the organization as much as possible. Tell the entire story, tell everybody's story, because people identify with that. And they're like, it's one thing for me to share something I've done. It's a whole nother thing when my wife brags on something that I've done with a group of people I'm with. Man, that makes me feel a ton better. Right.
Yep.
And so I think that would be, what would the advice that I give is share everyone's success story. And one of the organizations I work with, they do that phenomenal. They have an innovation suggestion platform that people can share, but then the CEO will send out a company-wide email on Sarah's innovation suggestion was phenomenal. We were able to do this, this, and this. Thank you so much for that. So again, it's not look how great we are. It was look how great you are. You've made us, and they tell that story. Yes. And that's the way to I think have impact moving forward.
I think what you're describing, because we were taught, you had mentioned, how do we find the language, right? How do I help you as a company and find the language to communicate this moving forward? And that's, I think right there, you've hit it. That's one of the ways. In order to be a good leader, in the way that you're describing, you have to also be a good listener of what's going on in the company. You remember National Lampoon's Holiday, Chevy Chase Christmas Vacation, where his boss would just come through like, give me somebody, put somebody on the phone. Like everyone remembers that corporate boss that didn't do anything, but we all kowtowed to. And now we're shifting from that individual to we're asking him to be more vulnerable. So we don't have to, kidnap him and his wife on the holidays. So
I don't know. We all needed a cousin Eddie in our life to take care of those moments, I guess.
Right. Oh my God. So it's just a great movie. Yep. There's this place of being able to listen to what's happening in the company means you have to ask for those stories and inviting those innovation moments, inviting those opportunities. So my dad worked for Eli Lilly, and during COVID, they enacted one of those things where they wanted feedback from everybody. They wanted an open forum for people to offer their ideas and their thoughts on from everything from manufacturing, logistics, distribution, development, science, you name it, so that people felt like they were being heard. But then you can get a cacophony of stuff coming in. So it's your responsibility to develop a platform and a way to gather that feedback, that information that's coming in, and then acknowledge when it does work, how to implement it if you decide you're going to. But the very act of doing that, right? When we're asking for change, we're asking you to create change in your company culture. We're asking you to hike this particular mountain and deliver to us, the employees, a better work-life balance and experience all the way around. One of those steps is by taking the time to hear and listen to what your employees, your company, your people are doing, and then recognizing it, right? That's a step of involvement that perhaps most places and people haven't seen before, right? So that could be a really great beginning to developing and getting that progress we're talking about and company culture change, which is, how do I begin as a leader to take acknowledgement for these things? How do I participate in this and then set the example? Well, that's one great way. Offer opportunities for voices to be heard, recognize those voices when they are heard, and then not just that, but actually implement something. Like I've seen them go, it was a great idea, and that was a great suggestion, and da-da-da, but no one ever takes action,
Right.
right? Everybody's got lots of buckets of ideas, but where's the action behind it, and when do we get to see what that looks like? You can pat everybody on the back all day, but you're just going to end up with the sore elbow.
Yeah.
You know, you got to actually have some action in there.
Yep.
So
that's one of the things that I do with companies is I help them, that I've done with that is specifically we'll with some of those organizations we'll do like just a virtual company wide quarterly update, kind of what's going on. This is where we're at, kind of moving forward, some things to know. And within that update, we always go over this past quarter, X number of innovation suggestions were made. Of those, 3 have been implemented, 7 are in progress, 2 are under evaluation, and 3 couldn't be done because of A, B, and C. And so, again, it is recognizing the progress that has been made for them. And so that is, again, that's just a way of you're seeing that it has been implemented. And another way that we do that is for some organizations, I'll do some call this a huddle in the morning. And
yes,
I can
stand
do this,
up.
right. I can do this either in person for them, or I've done it virtually as well. But again, not everybody has the ability to stand up in front of somebody and share and make something connect. So with that, I either do that myself, or I train the department directors or the branch managers and that kind of stuff. And all they do is 5 minutes, and it's 2 purposes. One is to inform, and one is to inspire. And so in that inspire piece is something there to kind of, just encourage people in what they're doing. And it's typically tied to somebody's success story within the organization. That, we're talking about, geese fly together, and they do that in the V formation, and that helps to pull people along, and helps that not every goose has to exert the same amount of effort to move forward. Somebody's carrying more of the load and that kind of stuff, and then we switch it around. Well, for example, when Terry was working with her team, she was the lead goose many times, but over the past few weeks, we've seen, Steve has come on, and now they're helping to fly together, and they're making an impact, and they're doing ABC. And so, and again, in just a couple of minutes, you've inspired them about something and recognized an achievement. And then again, when people are when there's some kind of, you smile, you're in the story, you celebrate a little bit, and then you put some information around that information sticks much better. So if it's like, okay, now do that, and don't forget, coming up, we need everybody to go through and go on the employee engagement survey, get that filled out. Or there's a new process that everybody needs to come when it comes to loan origination, make sure you go on to da-da-da-da. But if you can tie that inspiration information together, that sticks. And so now that information is now connected to that story of inspiration, and it's typically remembered much more positively to begin with than it is in a negative way on some of that information. Sometimes it has to be delivered. So that's one of the things I've figured I've had an opportunity to be a part of over the past 10 or 12 years, is helping the internal messaging of organizations, and specifically how it impacts their culture. And I've, that's one of the ways that we've been able to do that. So that goes back.
Are you examining reward systems at all? Like, the reason why it occurs to me is, I was going to ask the question, which is, how do we reward vulnerability? Right? We're asking not only our leaders to be vulnerable, and show by example when they're asking for developing and vision mapping for cultural change, internal cultural change. But then we're also asking the employees to be vulnerable, because they're going to get up and share ideas, concepts, new thoughts, processes, suggestions. When it's a failure, or when it's, and I don't like to call it a failure, because if you've learned something from it, then technically you're not failing, you're just falling and learning. How do we ask not just to share the successes, but some of the trials that we go through in being vulnerable? How do we reward vulnerability? What does that look like?
Rewarding vulnerability. That's a good question.
Or how do we begin to look at
I think
rewarding
it goes back to
vulnerability?
what you said there, is that the way you reward vulnerability and failure, mistakes, whatever, when it comes, ever how you want to couch that, is focusing on what was learned through that is so. Because of that, now we know it led us to this next step, and that had this not happened, we may never have gotten to this step. And so I think it is, what's the Sound of Music? Is it Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right. So I think the way you reward vulnerability, you reward authenticity, and how you reward that for people is you take people on the journey of what we learned through that, and how that has helped us to move forward. And I think if you can couch it that way, that it's not just point out the problem or the issue or the failure or the vulnerability, but I was writing one of the weekly resource trail guide things. I was writing that today, and I was talking about some financial stuff. And this is that you have to track your money. You have to know where you're spending it. If you don't know where you're spending it, you can't change how you're spending it. And that sometimes the vulnerability is the willingness to track where you're at so that you can get where you want to be. You can't get somewhere if you don't know where your starting point is what that whole thing is. So I think that is how you reward that. The reward is not so much, I think the reward is seeing the next step, as opposed to being focused on how you were stuck, if that makes sense.
Well, yes. And I think a good way to share this, I suppose, one is, it occurred to me, like in project management, we have what's called lessons learned. And that is usually at the end of an iteration or what have you, when they talk about lessons learned, so that they can begin to take and apply those lessons forward. I think the other side of this is, vulnerability isn't the act of pointing out what was done wrong. It's the presence, awareness, and availability of recognizing how you're living, who you're being, and what you're doing, and that there are changes that could be made in order to move forward, right?
Right.
And true vulnerability is just recognizing that was great, but that's not where we want to be now, and we want to move in this direction. So if those things aren't serving us, then that's okay. It isn't a judgment about them. They're not good or bad. They're just not serving where we're headed now. And true vulnerability is able to recognize that, point them out, and make suggestions for how to begin to move forward and make those changes. And I think gratitude. I think, we need to look at, thank you for sharing your lesson learned. Thank you for taking the time and the energy to walk down that particular path. You doing it in your department now saved 30 other people in other departments not having to make that step, or those 23 steps, and realizing that this is where we can go now, right? That is valuable, having that information. I now know, as what Edison said, I now know 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. Like, we need the 10,000 steps. We need the other 10,000 steps. We need the knowledge and the information of what was gained in taking those 10,000 steps. And I think a lot of companies just bypass those steps and was like, well, we just want the end result. We just want to know how it was. Well, no, there's experience to be had taking those actionable steps and recognizing, why they did or didn't work, what you can get out of them, how they can be applied in other ways. And by the way, having that perspective means that you can now take a look at those 10,000 steps and say, they didn't work here. But something I realized while taking those steps is that 2,373 of them could be applied over here and make this entire department more efficient. Most of us don't think about that. A lot of executives probably don't realize that while our staff are taking those 10,000 steps, there is value to be had from those lessons and from that information. And if it is put into a way that can then be utilized to for progress in other departments, it's a total win-win. I think you got
Sure.
productivity, efficiency, you've got all those different things that are improving as a result of allowing people to take the time to be vulnerable and take those steps. So let's jump back a little bit. Your OG story with fear, your origin story with fear as an entrepreneur. I started out when you were in college, losing your opportunity to play baseball. Do you, when you were talking to me before about this, it's interesting because I know a lot of people don't have the moment that happen simultaneously where they recognize opportunity, right? You had that huge change where all of a sudden the dream that you were building and what you were heading towards suddenly just disappeared. And you were able to pivot and sort of put your energy into the, creativity and landscaping and a business. How does one prepare themselves for these spaces, especially when you're young? It can seem, first of all, daunting. Second of all, oh my God, what do I do? The world everything's the world. I mean, it's all the world, and it's so much bigger, and it's so much the sky is falling for us that we realize, when you get older and you've had hindsight, and you and I can look back and go like, dude, trust me, there's going to be 83,000 more of those coming. So just relax. It's going to be good. Now is the time to look at opportunity and figure out how you can pivot. And I think we don't teach pivoting a lot. We don't really teach being prepared. I don't want to call it have a plan B, have a backup or whatever. Our parents used to always say, well, what are you really going to do? Like if this doesn't work out, suggesting that you're going to fail. Most of us didn't want to hear that message. We didn't want to hear that we wouldn't succeed because we felt like that was undermining our progress at where we were. But there is something to be said for having the skill set to pivot when it's necessary.
Yeah. So I'm gonna frame my answer within the sports world, if that's good. So nowadays, my son-in-law and I coach a travel girls softball team, and what it seems like in sports nowadays is kids have become so focused on one sport that they're missing out on what they learn from other sports that can make them better in the one that they're the best at. So for me, what allowed me to pivot is, one, I was blessed to have incredible mentors in my life. My mom and my dad, my aunt, my uncles, my grandparents, some mentors I had from baseball and from faith, and some different. I was blessed with great mentors. So I guess step number one is make sure you surround yourself with good people. It's hard to pivot by yourself. Secondly, I would say is that the best way to pivot is to be all in on what you're doing, but be open to other opportunities that you can learn. So I would say that in the sports metaphor, I became a better baseball player when I played football, and I played basketball when I was in school, and I played soccer. I was the worst soccer player that has ever lived in this entire world ever. I didn't even know that they had fullbacks, but there was a position called fullback on soccer.
Yes.
Here's what I did. Kick them in the shin or kick the ball, but one way or the other, they were going to stop. That was me in soccer. I am not a soccer player. But what I learned in soccer is the flow of a team and how one thing on one end of the field has an incredible impact on the other.
Yep.
That translates to baseball, man. Right? I mean, that translated for me from a baseball standpoint. So the only way I know to be able to pivot when the scholarship goes away is that if I put all my eggs in one basket and only learning one set of skills and not being open to learn other things along the way, you have nothing to pivot to.
True.
You think you have nothing to pivot to.
Right.
And again, so I think the combination of having the right people and you pursuing as many other passions as possible while you're going after that, whatever that is, is, in your life, that when the door gets shut, it's not the only door. It's not the only way to do that. And wow, that is easy to say and hard to live, right? So,
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that, especially when we're talking young adults here, developing young adults, knowing what you're capable of is a huge statement. It's a huge move. And if what you've been doing and your parents have been only supporting you in baseball for the last 5 or 6 years while you're in high school, or one specific sport, one specific action, one specific set of focuses, it's going to be really challenging for that person to recognize what they're capable of when there aren't other pieces of evidence that show what you're capable of, right? Mm-hmm. How, as a parent, raising future entrepreneurs, which, by the way, y'all are out there doing it right now, ladies and gentlemen. You're out raising entrepreneurs because they are growing fast and furious, especially post-COVID. There are so many entrepreneurs and people with entrepreneurial spirit, and thank God. I love it. I think we should be. I think everybody is a little entrepreneur. We're all like little creators, We should be encouraged to do that. But in order to be really good at being an entrepreneur, being able to pivot and know what you're capable of are two crucial elements, I think, in terms of your own personal progress.
Yeah, I think it is. For me, I would love to say, Michael, that I just immediately pivoted to landscape, but I didn't. I didn't pivot that dramatically. I was like, okay, I'm going to find another school to play at. I'm going to go try out, and so. Sometimes the only way you can make the big pivot is that you're willing to make the small little ones along the way. That what I found is this: I went to another school, had a bad tryout, things just didn't work out, didn't get there. Went on to school locally. Coach never talked to me about playing at that school. My buddy went to play, who got a scholarship at that school. Coach came to him and goes, "Man, where's Jay? Why is he coming out?" He goes, "Well, he's not coming. You never talked to him." And so what I did was this: is the only way I pivoted from baseball to landscape is there were some small little shifts along the way to prepare me to make that. Okay, I had to realize I pivoted from one, lost it, pivoted to another one, thought I was going to do it, didn't work out there. Is that you have to make the realization that the door's closed and stop trying to kick that one in and start looking for the cracks in the other ones. And sometimes it's small little pivots along the way that get you to the one there's the open door. And that's, for me, what it was. And so, I tried, just didn't work, went on. Landscape was something I loved as well, had done that for myself, for other people. As I was a kid, like I told you, I'd be 9 years old pushing a mower around going, somebody's got to have their grass mowed in the neighborhood, so just walk around and look for the bad yards and knock on the door, right? That's
well,
what you do.
You're talking about seeing opportunity. As a kid, I thought, mowing the lawn, I do it for my parents. Why would I want to do it for everybody else? My God, it takes up my afternoons. And I think there's a different mindset between the young entrepreneur and me, which was, seeing this lawnmower and the gas can and realizing, but if I did this and I made $20 off my lawn and I did this for 20 lawns in the area and I got $400, I just did math real quick by the folks. My dad is listening to this right now, shaking his head because he knows I can't add. I have my own origin story with math, which was just, math was never my thing. And I have this whole concept. It was like funny because I was coming from college. My dad was so sweet. He always supported me no matter what, even in my stupidity. And he used to give me this Texaco gas card. And I'm on the side of the road. I've run out of gas. I'm pissed and irritated. And I'm calling him because I can't understand how I could end up out of gas, because I know that there's another quarter of a tank in there. There's 5 quarters. And I only spent 4 of the quarters of the tank. So there's got to be another quarter. And he's like, "What are you talking about?
Funny.
5 quarters, son." And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You sure? Are you sure it's 5 quarters?" "Yeah, Dad, I was looking at it right here. It's got 5 lines, markings in there.
and I hadn't used up all of them. So that's why I started my consulting company. It's called Fifth Quarter Consulting, because there's always room in the tank. There's always something.
That's hilarious. I love that.
We're gonna find that fifth quarter. We're gonna implement that, and we're gonna make that happen. So, I think, learning to pivot is key. I think being surrounded by mentors, and I think that's the difference. Like you're talking about, you can be surrounded by important people, influential people, but a real mentor, like having a real mentor in your life, can be a game changer at what you believe you're capable of doing. There's a difference between someone who gives good advice and someone who shows you a way forward. And that I've had mentors that have shown me the way forward out of where I was. That's different. Like just showing you how to do something or how something can be done is very different than showing you how to get out of where you are, especially if you've dug yourself in and you're like me and a stubborn son of a bitch who just can't seem to get his head figured out, and you're stuck in a place because you made some bad choices. It's hard to see how to get out of there. And a good mentor, I think, whether that's ministry or coach or whatever, could be that key to helping you see how to pivot from where you are out and into the next version of yourself.
Yeah, my dad, I got a lot of quotes from my dad through the years that kind of have always stuck with me. But he always
dads.
said, yes.
I'll thank dads right now.
That's right. He said
their puns and their quotes.
Yeah, that's right. He said that, some lessons you have to learn the hard way yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can learn a lesson from someone else, that's even better, because you don't have to go through all the hard part of it of learning that. And so I think that's what a mentor does, is they are, they help you understand which obstacles you need to go through and which obstacles you should plow around, because they know that going through certain obstacles is going to make you better. Stronger. And they know that certain obstacles are better for you not to waste your time with that, because the experience is not going to move you forward. And I think that's the valuable part of a mentor. Speaking of mentors, so I was doing some training in Atlanta for company I work with, some business development training, and I met Stephen Falk. He is an author, wrote the book called Intrinsic Motivation. Incredible book. And you were talking about seeing these opportunities, and that, you saw a mower that you never wanted to touch after your dad made you mow your grass. I would see the mower, and I did the math in my head going, and I counted up how many yards were around the block, and I could do all that kind of stuff. Stephen Falk in Intrinsic Motivation, he talks about, here's the book in a nutshell. It's FEO, focus on exciting outcomes, as opposed to the process or the pivot that has to happen. Focus on the outcome if the pivot does happen. And I think that is the thing, is focus on the exciting outcomes. And he said this, he learned to make doing taxes fun, because and the way he said that is because he understood this, is that when he got the taxes done, right, he focused on an outcome that was the taxes were done, and he was able to do this. I was telling this, recommend this book to somebody the other day, and I was talking to them, and they're like, I told them about the taxes. They didn't laugh like you did, which most everybody does.
Uh-huh.
The biggest smile came on Gary's face, and he said, man, I love tax season. He says, because the way I've got it set up, I know this, what I get back on taxes every year funds the family vacation for us. And so I can't wait for the taxes to get done. What he's done is this: instead of focusing on the dread of doing taxes, he has learned to focus on the exciting outcome that once the taxes are done, what it brings for him and his family. And to me, that what Stephen writes about in that book, that intrinsic motivation within us, is that if we see the outcome as opposed to all the stuff that pivots are not easy, and pivots are not always comfortable, right? The only way we can be comfortable being uncomfortable is when we focus on the exciting outcome on the other side of the pivot, as opposed to everything that's going to happen when the pivot has to happen. To me, great book, great. I got a chance to pick his brain. He was in some of the training, and during the breaks and stuff, I just sat there and had a list of questions I just went through, and I was like just getting stuff from him and stuff like that. But great book, Intrinsic Motivation, Focus on Exciting Outcomes.
Well, I think this speaks to some of the things I talk about both in this speech, which is making fear your friend, but also on this show I've mentioned a few times. The human brain loves to tell stories. It's one of the things that we just do naturally, which is we need a beginning, middle, and an end. And I think for those of us who spend a lot of our energy and time, we do great. One of the things we do as kids, and this is what humans do too, is we dream. We dream big. We dream about life. We dream about becoming superheroes. We dream about becoming doctors and space astronauts, and you name it, we dream. And then as we get older, those dreams become hobbies and projects. Those dreams become business startups. Those dreams become changing who and how we live and what we're going to do in the next moment to become the next great version of ourselves. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an unknown to this, right? The end is always unknown. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. We don't know what's going to happen if I put my time and my energy in building this company. I don't know that the outcome is going to be positive. I could die. It could disappear. Who knows, right? But our brain does this funny thing where it's desperate to fill in the end for us. It needs to know. For some reason, it has to have an answer. And if you don't focus on exciting outcomes, if you don't put an exciting outcome on the end of that story, your brain is going to fill it in with the things that you doubt. It's going to fill it in with the things you're not sure about. It's going to make you think, oh, you're not worthy of this. You're not capable of this. You may not have enough money for this. You didn't get trained for this. Who do you think you are? Imposter syndrome. All of those things that can come creeping on in, right? And get in our way. And I love this idea of focusing on the exciting outcome, because if you can write it down, if you can put it on a dream board, a vision board, or whatever, and you can write it down, you are engaging with the outcome. You're engaging with your future. You're engaging with potential, right? Not just waiting and wondering, not just making some plans and hoping for the best. You're engaging with it, which means that the fear, the doubt, has less opportunity to infuse itself into your future and into your energies. And that potential for that outcome, that good, focused, exciting outcome, has greater opportunity to present itself, greater opportunity to manifest in your life, because you're actively putting energy towards that, right? I think that's wonderful. I think that's the tip for today, folks. We're going to end the show right here. You can go be successful by doing exactly that. Focus on exciting outcomes. I think that's part of it. I think that's part of what entrepreneurs do, is we focus on exciting outcomes. It's why we even start the business to begin with, because we see this incredible opportunity, this incredible gift, this incredible service or product or whatever it is. And then we have to take all the steps to get there. And during that journey is when we can get knocked down. During that journey is when we need to pivot. During that journey is when we need to recognize what we're capable of and, refit ourselves to meet the dream, right? We got to adjust. I'm not always going to end up the same person that I started out with, One of these great quotes that I love from Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote this series of books about conversations with God. He was asking that same question about, like, why do we go through some of the things we go through? Why do we have to go through these hard things? And I love God's response in this, where he said, sometimes we have to become that which we are not in order to understand and know that which we were meant to be.
That's good.
And boy, does that not spell out some of the shit I put myself through in my life, where I was like, okay. So it took me a long time to realize that which I needed to be, because I had to go through a lot of that which I was not, and go, I definitely know that's not me. I definitely know that's not what I want to do, because I've done it and I don't like it, and I don't want to do it. Other people are like my dad, who are like, why did you have to go do it? I could have told you it was no good, because he sees it. he's that mentor who's like, yeah, don't do that. And I'm like, but I got to do that stupid thing first before I can do this really smart thing over here. It's like I'm stuck. I'm like one of those individuals who has to do the dumb, put my hand on the hot plate, hit 10 times. Well, are you sure? Is it the same with the right? Because I don't know. I mean, maybe the left is super sensitive and the right's not. My brain does that. That's what my brain does. It's like, well, I'm going to test you could be wrong once. And if I get it right, just in that one moment, I feel vindicated for making the stupid choice. But, trust me, folks, there's a lot of us out here who've stumbled, and you don't have to make the dumb choices if you want to learn from us. Listen to a show, get a mentor, find somebody to help you focus on those exciting outcomes, because that is possible, and you can pivot, which is great. I think these lessons are really, really good for us. Before we move to, saying goodbye, any major obstacles, challenges, and things you currently face that you see that we need to address, or as a culture, or society, or a company, especially when you're providing coaching and consulting for these kind of services?
I would wrap it up this way from a culture standpoint is the only way you fix culture is taking personal responsibility for yourself in the culture first. I can't fix it before I fix me. And I have to, what I mean by that is I can't expect people to be the type of culture I want to be in if I'm not willing to be that myself. And I think that's the challenge right there. A lot of times is the big challenge is today is we live in a overall human being culture today of talking about the things that everybody else is doing wrong and not being willing to address the things in our own life first. And I think I
apologize for that.
That's human nature. And no worries. That's human nature in of itself. And I think I'm not going to say who I had this conversation with, but it was recently. Now, he may know who he is when he hears me talk about this on here. He has mentioned repeatedly to me, I meet up with him and catch up with him. How are things going? I'm still working, I'm working on letting go of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, it's interesting. You've been working on letting go of blah, blah, blah for 3, 4, or 5 years now. Is there a certain point when you just actually let go and don't talk about letting go and don't think about letting go, but just actually let go? And I wondered about that as an idea. We become so focused on the strategy, the concept of change, right? The idea of cultural change, that we spend so much time writing about it, talking about it, thinking about it. We don't actually do the change. Is there something we can help light a match for folks to be like, okay, it's time to shit and get off that pot? Or, yes, it's awesome that you want to implement change. It's great that you think you can have a strategy or whatever, but let's talk about some real steps you can take as a leader in your organization to begin to make this happen. I would say if I had someone in a leadership position ask me for that advice, I would say
hire Jay Thompson and hike the mountain. That's step number 1.
Outside of that, the second thing, I guess, I would say this is that you have to spend some time identifying the things that only you can do as a leader. And then once you've identified that, anything else that's not on that list, you need to let go and give off to somebody else.
Okay.
Because chances are they can do it better and more efficient than you can. And the amount of return that you're going to get from doing that versus doing the things that only you can do as a leader, not going to get that return. So that's not maybe letting go of something bad. I think I think the greater challenge is letting go of something you're good at so that you can do what you're best at. That's the harder thing to let go of.
Yes. Remember that, ladies. Let's repeat that one more time, would you, for everybody?
Yeah, I think the harder thing to let go of is what you're good at so that you can do what you're best at.
Amen. And I think a little bit of introspection and a little bit of understanding about what it is you're really good at, what you're best at, I should say, as opposed to what you're just good at, and then learning to delegate the good out to others who are best at it.
Right.
So that you can save your energy for the things you really need to be amazing at, is a key. Does the Hike the Mountain help leaders identify those things?
Yeah, I mean, that's more just in what we do with our one-on-one coaching and stuff like that is asking that. I mean, part of those switchbacks of personal development, part of that is defining who you are, what you do best, and part of that is also accountability. So there's the switchback of definition and the switchback of accountability. And that's part of that process is of letting someone coach you is not that they've got the answers, but they lead you to discover those for yourself. And I think that's one of the things we do at Hike the Mountain from a coaching standpoint.
Well, there's been, golden nuggets galore on this particular journey today, ladies and gentlemen, of hiking the mountain on the Fearless Road, by the way, which is, focus on exciting outcomes, mentorship, being able to pivot, cultural change from the inside, understanding what you're best at so that you can help others be good at what they're good at, or letting go of what you're good at and delegating that so that you can focus on what you're best at. Chock full of really amazing stuff. And if you are curious about whether or not you want to address your switchbacks, make some cultural change, check out Jay Thompson and hikethemountainorg, where I think you can discover some pretty incredible things about yourself and what you're capable of. But also, I think you're going to discover what Jay's capable of, and he can bring some magic. And you brought some for us today, some incredible advice and tips and insights. Thank you very much for sharing your time with me. Again, my friend, I love talking to you. We can spend hours at this particular table, listening to each other talk about this stuff, but we may have to have you back on again to do a follow-up. But I really appreciate your time. I'm grateful to you and your family. I hope you have a wonderful trip. You're going to Curacao, I hear.
Yeah, going to be, awesome. My son's getting married. Going to get to do that ceremony. It's actually a week from today, so excited about that.
That's incredible. I love that for you. You have to share that with me when you get back in town. I'd love to hear about it and see the pictures. Safe travels, my friend, please. And then tips and tricks, ladies and gentlemen. If they want to find out more about Jay Thompson, where do they go?
Easiest is probably just go to the website, hikethemountainorg. That's .org, not .com. Or you can just email me it's jay@hikethemountainorg. And I'll love to connect and figure out, what it looks like to hike the mountains that are in your life when it comes to that. So
absolutely, if you need help,
get in touch with me that way.
Yep. And if you need to look at your switchbacks or whatever, I'll put the links and things down below so you guys know where you can get more information about Jay. Jay, thank you so much for joining us on the Fearless Road, hiking our own particular mountain for success. This has been an incredible journey, and we've learned a lot, and I can't wait to learn some more from you. Thanks, blessed, Michael. Be well, stay fearless.
It's been an honor, my friend. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Like I said, I always get a little bit of my Michaelisms from you, and so I got some good stuff today.
Yeah, like 5 quarters of a tank. I'm here with.
I'm never gonna forget that. I'm never gonna forget that.
I got some gems. Let me tell you. If you ever wonder. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks everybody for listening, for lending your ears and taking the time. Have a blessed and amazing day. Stay fearless. Hike your own mountain, and remember, if you ever need help and support, we are here. Jay Thompson at hikethemountainorg, Michael DeVue at Fearless Road. So, have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.